Transportation Safety Board meeting of Monday, December 7th. Present with me are Councilman, I'm Rick Best, President of the board.
I can learn to understand you much better if I can get familiar with the way you talk.
Yeah, that's our goal today. We're going to be working on that throughout. Thank you for that reminder, Commissioner. With me are Councilman Roy Christensen, Commissioner Deb Shore, Commissioner Roma Amundsen, and Councilwoman Jane Raybold. So thank you for being with us today. We are under the Open Meetings Act. This meeting of the City of Lincoln, Lancaster County Railroad Transportation Safety District, commonly referred to as the RTSD, is subject to and adheres to the Nebraska Open Meetings Act. A copy of the Open Meetings Act is available for inspection and is posted by the entrance to this room. The RTSD agenda and all the materials that are being considered at today's meeting were posted on the RTSD website on November 25th, 2020. The RTSD website is also accessible by links from both the City of Lincoln and Lancaster County official government sites. In addition, on November 30th, 2020, the meeting agenda was posted on the bulletin board located in City Hall, first floor, 555 South 10th Street. A copy of the agenda is also available at the entrance to this room. One copy of the meeting agenda and all the materials being considered today are located at the dais, and complete copies of these materials are on file at the RTSD office at 949 West Bond Street, Suite 200. With that, we will move on to item 3, the approval of the minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Abstain.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries 4-0. We'll move on to item 4, a report of statement of financial activity. Mr. Rohde will be presenting.
Give it up.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Ron Rohde from the Lancaster County Budget and Fiscal Office, and I'm here to present the Statement of Financial Activities for the RTSD through November 20th, 2020. We put a close date of November 20th, 2020, so we had ample time to get the financials in place. Just as in the past, we have broken this up into 3 categories. The first category is receipts and disbursements. The second category are cash and investments. And the third is just a detailed breakdown of the investments. I also like to note that through November 20th, 39% of the year had elapsed. So as we go through the percentages, you can see the percentage versus the percentage of a year elapsed. So going on to the first section, the receipts and disbursements. For receipts, we had tax receipts, actual of $1,566,561 on a budget of $5,050,000 for the year, which represented 31% collected. Investment interest income, actuals through November 20th were $93,580 on a budget of $60,000. Roger and I will probably make a note of that as we budget next year. We might have to increase that a little bit. That's a good problem to have, is the fact that we were 156% of budget at that time. Overall receipts were $1,660,141 on a budget of $5,110,000. That's for the entire year, which represented 32% of the receipts collected. For the disbursements, we had commissions and refunds to state of Nebraska, $30,855 on a budget of $116,000, 27% expended. Operating costs were $19,442 on a budget of $104,200, which was 19%. Construction project costs were $621,822 on a budget of $5,865,000, which represented 11% expended. Overall, we were at $672,118 disbursements on a budget of $6,085,200, which was 11%. The second section are cash and investments. The main two items there are the ending cash balance. The ending cash balance is $535,215. And then the ending investment balance is $11,371,107. Total fund balance, $11,906,322. The main item to point out there is the ending cash balance. Roger works hand in hand with the Lancaster County Treasurer as far as keeping a good liquid amount available for any upcoming items that will be due. And then the third section is just the detail of the ending investment balance of $11,371,107. It has a breakdown by institution, rate, and maturity date. And so that detail is provided for you to view outside of the meeting. That ends the fiscal year 21 statement of financial activities through November 20th, 2020. Any questions?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the investments have really done terrific. So would you credit the money markets for that exceptional increase, or the certificate of deposits?
It's probably a combination of both, Jane. It's just both of them have had good increases over the last few months. So I can get you further detail outside of the meeting, and that'll be based on what the treasurer has to report. So great question. I think it's a combination of the two, but I'll find out for sure.
Well, it's a great problem to have.
Yeah.
There you go. And I believe we do need a motion to receive this report, to approve this report.
I move that we receive this report.
Second.
Yeah, just let me add, we are approving it as I understand it. So Commissioner Amundson, is it okay to amend your
Oh, sure, yeah.
motion to approve? Very good. We have a motion and a second to approve the financial report. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Thank
Thank
you, Ron. We'll move on to item 5, report regarding current budget status.
Okay, good morning. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. I hope all of your families and yourselves are well and safe these days. Remarkable times, and appreciate your being here today. On the budget itself, and it's on the web, not an awful lot to report. In the operating part of the budget, expenditures for legal services and most of the accounting and auditing services have been paid out so far this year. None of the other billings have come through. In the railroad crossing improvements, we budget $250,000 every year. And while we haven't paid anybody anything right now, I would tell you currently, through previously signed agreements, 56th and Old Cheney, the replacement of that crossing, and the 18th and Y crossing that's done, we have an agreement commitment to pay out about $164,500 out of that account. Those bills will yet be coming in. And then the only other expenditure currently in the capital is the $574,000 plus for our 33rd and Cornhusker, the continued engineering and NEPA process that's going on up there. I would point out on the web, I have an error in that spreadsheet at the bottom right-hand corner. It shows that we still, the far right column shows you the percent of the budget that is unspent. And those, the bottom line and the third from the bottom line say 100%. That is incorrect. I've got to get the formula corrected, and Ron and I'll do that. We're right at 89%, not a problem. But just wanted to point that out in case somebody saw that an error there. Nothing to approve. Just would tell you we're doing fine with the budget as we have it thus far at this point. Okay. did I not have?
It's not feeding it for some reason.
Well, I'll let you work on that and we'll keep going. So no action is required on that item, but I'd certainly answer any questions.
Seems like we continue to be in good position on this year's budget as well. The overall numbers were good, but this year's budget's going in a way that's very satisfactory too.
Yes, we don't have a lot of other project activity going on. I think we've kind of been in a holding pattern with the levy set from last year, and 33rd and Cornhusker has kind of been our primary focus. We do have some upcoming projects, some other things that we've deferred. I'm sure we'll get into more discussion of that later in the meeting, but we are doing well. We're not going to have to go beg and borrow money somewhere right away at this point. So,
at meetings like this, that's always good news. So, all right. Any further discussion on the presentation here? If not, we'll move on to item number 6, the consideration of BNSF Old Cheney Crossing Interlocal.
okay, and Sarah Hartzell from Parks is here today. What I will do is, this is a piece of sidewalk that we have needed to complete for a long, long time. On the screen, this is Old Cheney Road. And west is to the left, and this is just west of Hunts Drive. The urban area on the far left-hand side is Pioneers Park. Right in the middle is the 2 BNSF tracks that cross, and we are working on, and this interlocal agreement, if approved by the board today, would be an interlocal between the City of Lincoln and the RTSD, for the RTSD to provide funding to assist in this work. And the work involves right at the railroad tracks. The railroad will need to put in additional crossing panels for the sidewalk in that area. They would do that work. And then the city would hire a contractor to construct sidewalk and some additional paving from the existing sidewalk on the east side, just west of Hunts Drive, up through. There is an additional driveway there so that the railroad can get on and off and across that sidewalk to access their equipment, and then the sidewalk on over to the trail that's there in the Jamaica Trail in Pioneers Park. And if Sarah would come up, I will go back to my the interlocal agreement. The very consistent over the years. The RTSD has been the local funding partner for the city and county for parts and pieces of the project, and particularly paying for the work that is being done on the railroad right-of-way itself. And specifically for this one, in our interlocal agreement under the budget and finance, each year we appropriate or budget $100,000 for emergency projects, and that $100,000 is in the budget. And I am recommending to you, and this agreement would say that we would pay for the RTSD share out of that. We would be paying the city for the actual cost of whatever work the BNSF Railroad does to place, and paying for the sidewalks on the railroad right-of-way, and then the city would be picking up the cost of the sidewalks outside of the railroad right-of-way, and there is some cost sharing going on in that area too, and Sarah will cover that for us.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Hartzell with Parks and Recreation. I am the Trails Coordinator for the city, but I also serve on what is called the Complete Streets Committee. It's a committee that was of staff people that look at really kind of gaps in our system that keep people from getting safely from neighborhoods onto our trail system. Sometimes we work on getting neighborhood connections over to school properties. It really is kind of a committee that kind of picks up little problem areas and tries to fund those. We don't have a huge budget, but we do get somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 per year through the city's Lincoln Transportation Utilities Department budget. to use on these projects. So this project, we had a larger LTU project to look at the 14th and Warlick intersection, and part of that project was to connect the trail, which is currently on the north side of Old Cheney Road, over to the Jamaica Trail right up against Wilderness Park there. That project has been delayed, but we do have a significant amount of traffic, both pedestrian and bicycle, that uses this connection to get onto the Jamaica or to go into Wilderness Park. One of the complications of this, it's a good thing, but it does make it a little more difficult for pedestrian and bicycle traffic, is the quiet zone through here has a median, a concrete median, which makes it impossible for vehicles to pull over into the other lane a little bit to get around pedestrians and bicyclists. So the pedestrians and bicyclists are most often forced to go through the gravel and lift their bicycle about 8 or 10 inches over the tracks and go on from there. It's really kind of an awkward crossing. So Complete Streets Committee looked at this project at picking up the additional costs, which I believe are going to run around $38,000 is what the estimate is in our budget to make this connection and get folks a safe sidewalk. We are going to delay the trail connection until that Warlick project gets worked through and see if we can do it at that time. But this will at least get one good, safe sidewalk connection for folks to get over to that trail and park. And off topic, I just wanted to thank this committee for the GPTN connector. That project received $900,000 from the RTSD to correct a trespass issue near Densmore Park. That bridge is completed and is being very heavily used. People are really excited about the project and are really putting it to good use. So thank you very much for your consideration on that.
Okay, so then just to get back to the numbers, this interlocal agreement, there's more work certainly to be done, but if this board approved this interlocal agreement, your financial commitment that we're making to the city is to reimburse the city for the actual cost of the work on the railroad right-of-way that they do. That's estimated at $34,276. And to also pay the $2,000 permit fee that the city will have to get to do work on the railroad right-of-way. And then to reimburse the city for the cost of the sidewalks and the driveway that's on the railroad right-of-way that the city would build. And that estimated cost is just a little over $20,000. So those three together, by this interlocal agreement, we'd be committing $56,477 to assist the city. The work that still has to be done is the city needs to get a construction and maintenance agreement with BNSF. That draft agreement has been sent to the railroad. Chris Humphrey, whom you all know from managing our project, is currently working on that. That CM agreement, once signed by the railroad, and this interlocal agreement, if approved today, would then go on to the city council for their approval. And then the city would move ahead with the construction drawings to build the sidewalk and the railroad get their panels in. All that would certainly have to happen sometime next year in the summer or the spring. So again, the commitment for the RTSD, if you chose to approve this agreement today, just under $56,500. And I would say I agree with Sarah, this is a desperately needed link. I had been trying through various railroad managers for nearly 15 years to get this connection made. So I wholeheartedly support and encourage that this would be a good thing to do if the board sees fit.
Commissioner Shore, yes.
So did I hear you correctly, this project will not begin this fall?
No.
I would assume engineering would be over the winter and then spring construction.
Okay.
It involves concrete, so we kind of have to wait for weather, yeah.
Should be able to get the agreement stuff, and hopefully the city can run the interlocal agreement and the CM agreement through the city council, get the approvals in place so that they could be prepared to try to bid it next spring.
Okay.
Sarah, is this the new concrete around the tracks? Is it going to look similar to the crossings like on the Bison Trail headed to Pioneers Park or on First Street
That would
over
be a-
by Standing Bear,
Yeah, that
the
would
train
be,
tracks? that
the
are there?
Bison by, on Van Dorn would probably be a good comparison.
Got it, because they also have the arms coming down.
Yeah, we aren't planning to use asphalt. We're planning on using concrete for the
Concrete.
entire thing. I think the one on First has some asphalt on it.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Well, with the renewed emphasis on outdoor activities, I'm sure the traffic's increasing, and it doesn't sound very attractive to me to have people picking their bikes up and walking over railroad tracks. I wouldn't think the railroad would look on that as a very desirable way to have them cross either. So, good project. And any other questions? Do we need to approve this today? Then we need a motion, Roger, to
Yes.
approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this project. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item 7, Highway 2 Quiet Zone discussion.
So, good morning. If you'll allow me to digress just a little bit, rather than jumping right into a quiet zone discussion, it would seem like it would be most appropriate to kind of go through that whole Highway 2 corridor. We have BNSF and OPPD will start running trains January 1st, and I can highlight there's been a tremendous amount of work done. There's still some work yet to be done, even before we would consider actually the quiet zone. I do want to acknowledge, before we even start the discussion today, that I feel like BNSF and OPPD, with assistance from Operation Lifesaver, Nebraska section, and then a lot of support from Ann Ames in the County Commissioner's Office, Erica Hill up in LTU, and Shane Dostal in putting together a publicity program, and I'll get into that in a little bit too. So I get to stand here and give a report, but lots of other folks have been working very, very hard for the last 2 or 3 months to be prepared for trains to run safely up and down this corridor. What you see on the screen, I just want to remind us, I want to kind of run through all of the, oh, surely it's going to come up. I'm going to remind us that we did start a quiet zone study. Oh, there we go. So this is off of Google Earth, and the blue dots that run on the red line, those are the crossings in the Southwest Lincoln Quiet Zone that we started, and then we put on hold as we were looking at some other initiatives as it related to Hobson Yard and some of that. So there were 8 crossings. One of them is a trail crossing. 2 of them are on kind of local streets, and the other 5 are arterial streets. So then if we begin to look, I just really kind of want to run down the whole corridor of Highway 2. There's a lot of crossings, and it starts with West Calvert Street, and I would guess a lot of folks don't realize that West Calvert still has public right-of-way, even though it does not connect up to Highway 2 there north of Pioneers. So that's the first crossing on the north end that would begin to see some effect of the trains running. And then we've got Pioneers Boulevard right off of Highway 2. The railroad has come in, and that crossing had 2 tracks that crossed it previously. There was a switch that went over to the penitentiary area. The railroad removed both of those tracks earlier this fall and just put one of them back, so removed some of the encumbrances in the area and completely replaced the panels and the pavement approaching that. Then the next one on the air is 14th and Highway 2. Nothing unique about that. The rail just checking markings and signing. We continue on down Southwood Drive, residential drive into Southwood. That has gates and lights, but does not have a median in the middle. I should have said Pioneers and 14th Street do have medians. They may or may not meet all the requirements for a quiet zone in that area, but this crossing does not. And then moving on further, South 27th Street has medians in there. That crossing was replaced about 2 years ago, so it's in pretty good shape. Not much of anything needing to be done there. And then south of 33rd Street, there is a private, call it Parks Maintenance entrance there, adjacent to the Super Saver store. That's a driveway and an access in that
Russ's Market.
Let's be clear
That's
on
okay.
the terminology here.
Okay, you're right, I'm sorry. Yes,
That's okay.
yes, okay.
We're familiar with it, so.
I know, I get a lot of emails, and we've interacted with the railroad a lot right in that area. So that is what would be called a private crossing, which creates some other unique issues as you talk about railroad quiet zones. And then moving on down to South 40th Street, if you've driven by there today, one of the railroad signal poles has been leaning to the north for some time. The railroad is out there straightening that up, as well as adjusting and making sure the technology and the signals all the way along there is up to speed. There is medians there, but there's also a break in the median for the streets adjacent to that. Moving on down, we get to 48th Street. 48th Street, just a year ago, the city came in and put in new traffic signals on Highway 2 that are connected to the gates and lights, and BNSF put in a new concrete crossing there at 48th Street. There are medians there as well. The next one is the private driveway into well, I'll call it private. It must have a public access easement because people can drive in, but it's not a public right-of-way there to the concrete plant. Then we'll move on down to 56th and Old Cheney, and I would point out I'm sure you guys know, but for anybody that's listening and watching, the west right-of-way line of 56th Street is the point at which the ownership of the railroad tracks transfers from BNSF to OPPD. So from this point on to the county line and all the way to Nebraska City, those tracks are owned, maintained, and operated by Omaha Public Power District, even though BNSF is going to operate trains. And as you all know, that crossing was closed here a couple weeks ago. Brand new crossing in there. I think it turned out very well. And the railroad is in. And for most all of the gates and lights and signals that the railroad has on that entire corridor, they're going in and upgrading the circuitry, putting in different lamps and lights and technology in there that should make them more secure and safe.
They were working on that yesterday afternoon at 2 o'clock, Sunday afternoon, so.
Yes.
Working
And
hard.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Deb. Going on to the southeast, Pine Lake Road. This is a little bit, Google Earth is a little bit old, but thanks to the foresight or not of the city, as the city improved Pine Lake Road, there was a requirement to upgrade the railroad signal there. So those have complete, brand new, up-to-date gates, lights, bells, medians, as well as sidewalk and trail crossing in that location. And then we keep going. I probably should come out. And we come over 70th Street. 70th Street is one of those still not urbanized type roadways. It's still part of the old county road system, even though that's annexed into the city at this point. That crossing does have gates and lights. It does not have a median down the middle of the street. The crossing is a railroad tie crossing. At some point in the not too distant future, that probably will need to be replaced with new concrete crossing, but it does have current safety equipment on it.
Wait, Roger, it does have gates?
Yes.
It does?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
The next crossing is South 84th Street, one that has received a tremendous amount of attention, questions and whatnot, schools, Lincoln Electric System, neighbors, and I would be happy to report to you at this point There is a signed agreement between the City of Lincoln and OPPD to do the safety improvements, at least minimum safety improvements. The agreement calls for OPPD to install signal poles, gates, lights, bells, and they are out there working on that right now. They put some new conduit underneath the street Friday and maybe over the weekend. Starting at the end of this week, Friday morning at 7 o'clock, 84th Street will be totally closed, and OPPD's railroad contractor will be coming in and extending that new concrete crossing about 5 to 6 feet further east to accommodate the street or the city coming in the spring and rehabilitating the street, adding about 5 foot to the east side and putting a 3 foot wide median down through the middle. So by springtime or late spring, early summer, that crossing then will be fully compliant with gates, lights, and medians. We may have to adjust the sidewalk a little bit too, but I know we had received a tremendous number of calls and emails about that, but that work is going on. The next crossing is Yankee Hill Road. Again, an old drawing. That roadway is complete, and that, just like Pine Lake Road, has a complete brand new set of gates, lights, railroad equipment, and medians as well. Then the crossing that was there at Cheney, that's closed, and that went away. That was closed when Yankee Hill Road was completed. There's a private drive right there at Bennett, and I'm going through this because I want us all to remember we are a City of Lincoln, Lancaster County Railroad Transportation Safety District, and it behooves us to make sure that we're being mindful of how this new activity affects the whole county. 98th Street, Rokeby Road, and 120th Street all have some interaction with the State South Beltway and will have some modification and work done. So at this point, in conversations with Assistant County Engineer Larry Legg, we are monitoring and watching that, and then depending on the improvements made with the South Beltway project, any additional work that needs to be done would be coordinated with the railroad and the county. 134th Street, and a point of notice is the Isaac Walton League. There's a lot of activities that go on. There are some questions and concerns about sight distance and some things in there. I would tell the board that I do have a complete listing of the crossings in the county, and where there are issues, most of them have to do with sight distance and cleaning up things. I need to continue discussions with the county and get out and review some of those. As you're all aware, obviously it hasn't been easy to do work as normal these days, but the railroad is driving those as well and checking things. Sawtilla Road, as we're getting closer to Bennett, there's a private drive. Bennett Road, just right on the west side of Bennett. Garden Street, we've had several contacts about doing something with Garden Street. I think most all of the rest of these crossings, other than Highway 43 through Bennett, would just typically have the crossbucks. So it's passive warning, crossbucks, and either a stop or a yield sign. Those completely meet the safety requirements based on traffic, but we'll continue to monitor those. N43 there in Bennett does have gates and lights. Yes, Rick.
In that Bennett area, that's where we got the email from Michelle Knapp regarding the view, and that was one of the crossings there. Can you just point out, is it the green?
Yes.
Okay.
Right there. That's it. You know, and that's what do I want to say? There hasn't been a lot of train traffic, and a lot of the crossings in the county are old railroad ties, and as trains continue to run, I think we may see the railroad coming in and upgrading those materials from wooden ties to perhaps a concrete crossing. We'll see how that goes.
And some concern was mentioned about the view. I mean, you can see on your picture there, the foliage has grown up closer to the crossing, and I'm confident that the railroad's going to be looking at that very carefully.
Right. Between the county engineer's office and OPPD, trying to make sure that each of these intersections, whether the vegetation is, if it's on the railroad right-of-way, having them clean it up, or if it's on the county road right-of-way, having them clean it up.
Yeah.
But there's been a question raised about how many cars are driving on that street. I'm trying also to still continue or coordinate with the county engineer's office, and we'll do that. This may be a private drive into this granary elevator, not sure on that. And then again, Highway 43, that's under state designation. I did attend a village board meeting in Bennett a number of weeks ago, and they were asking about a quiet zone. This would have been the primary crossing, but as I relayed to them, NDOT has been very reluctant to include quiet zones on any or across their state highways. I think there may be one in Kearney, but it's part of a larger urban project, not a specific quiet zone across a state highway somewhere else. So the state has been reluctant to do that. As you can see, just like in Lincoln, I mean, here's a whole new grouping of residential properties being built along the railroad tracks, and then we get on out, we cross 176th, cross Bennett Road again, and then the county line at 190th, but we'll continue. So there are a fair number of crossings to be considered in all of this besides just what's going on in Lincoln. I feel, again, that the railroad has been fairly aggressive, assertive, certainly assertive, if not aggressive, in repairing, working on things. They will be running a couple of train cars between Nebraska City and Lincoln over the next few days, just checking. They've been doing tie work, ballast work, crossing work. Now they're going to be running some cars up and down. Shouldn't be long trains, but just wanting folks to know. And that's to check and try to make sure that everything is safe at that point. The other thing I really wanted to touch on was has to do with public education. Oops, sorry, wrong. So from the very beginning, BNSF and OPPD said that they felt it was important to be talking to the community. There haven't been trains on this track for a long, long time. So this is an email I got from BNSF yesterday. And again, BNSF, OPPD, Nebraska Operation Lifesaver, county, city, and the RTSD has been talking about how are we going to advise people of what's coming to be safe and be prepared. So this is kind of the layout of the publicity that BNSF and OPPD have. So there will be, Operation Lifesaver has 2 billboards going up in South Lincoln, and that should be happening today. One of those faces south at 56th Street, south of Highway 2. So if you're northbound on 56th, you're going to see that billboard. The other one faces east on Highway 2 near 14th Street. So those 2 billboards are going to be up in the air. There is a crash car display that is currently parked at 40th Street. I'm not sure it's quite close enough to the intersection. I was wondering if they didn't move it in close till they were kind of deploying all of these other things to get ready for today.
So far away from Highway 2, you can't read the text explaining what it is.
Right, okay. And then they are planning a massive mailing of postcards, and let's see if I can remember where. So this is a postcard that they are planning on mailing this card out to every home that has a registered voter within 1,000 feet of the tracks from Syracuse all the way through Lincoln up to the Calvert area. So again, just trying to remind people that this is happening, and then that's the backside of that postcard, reminding people, and I think probably the one that is most important is trains can run at any time of day or night and in either direction. We just need to keep reminding folks of that. The other, and I did have a picture of, that's a picture of a pickup, and we all fondly remember Harlan Layton, who would come to our meetings and remind us that in a train vehicle or train pedestrian crash, the train always wins. There just is no forgiveness, and that's not their fault, but we just need to make sure that everyone is being safe. So now,
Roger, on that postcard, we can't really read the font from here, but is there a link there where they can go for more information?
yes, for more information, there's a Nebraska.org for trains, and Jeff Davis's email link is on
Okay.
there as well.
And does it say there's only 2, or do they not want to specify that at this time? Okay.
They're not specifying that at this time. Okay, so let's go back then to...
Roger, going back to Deb's point, there's a really good summary on the lincoln.ed.gov. It's lincoln.ed.gov, code word is RTSD, and then it breaks it down to Highway 2 Railroad Corridor that has
Right.
a lot of really great information.
And so the city is also going to be doing some things, and you know what? I realize I did not point out a couple of other things in their program. They're planning on digital ads to run approximately 1 million digital ads over the next 6 weeks. And I can get you guys copies of this stuff that came in. Radio ads, they're going to run English and Spanish PSAs from December 14th through January 10th. And then just other grassroots, I know Jeff Davis and Michaela have been meeting with neighborhood associations, anybody that's contacted them. They are meeting with the Syracuse Chamber of Commerce tomorrow, I think. I don't know whether they're going to be there for a board meeting tonight or not. I know that they have interacted with the Archdiocese, with schools and whatnot in Southeast Lincoln, as well as Lincoln Public Schools. My sense is they're doing everything they can to reach out to the community and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to know what's going on. Couple of other things that are going on is that LTU is communicating with LFR and LPT about emergency access, emergency response. Those conversations are ongoing. LTU has prepared a traffic analysis document. It's 110 pages long. If you'd like me to go through that, that's a joke. But the goal is to be able to share with BNSF the issues with traffic congestion and safety that LTU would have concerns about when a train is going through. So basically, for Pioneers, 14th, 27th, those major intersections in Lincoln, they have analyzed the traffic from about 6:30 in the morning to 6:30 in the evening every 15 minutes and identified how many cars would be there, where cars would back up out of left turn lanes. The big issue on Highway 2 would be westbound left turns and eastbound right turns and getting stacked up and not being able to go across the tracks. Through traffic on 27th, 40th, 48th, 56th as well. And Actually, the railroad had welcomed us giving them that information. I will be sending that to their Executive Vice President of Operations yet this week for them to analyze and to use that information in their decision-making about operations. Again, not saying when they will or won't run a train, but it will help them in their decision-making, and I think they're genuine in wanting to know what those issues and concerns are. And I really appreciate LTU doing that, pulling that together. We'll make all of this information available whenever folks are interested in seeing that. So the item on, before I go to quiet zones, I feel very comfortable and pleased that the railroads, the city and the county and the RTSD have worked very hard to make sure this is going to be a safe corridor. There's always the potential of someone doing something inappropriately, and that makes me remind, in addition to the billboards and the cars and the postcards, LTU is stepping up and has 3 permanent message signs. There is 2 on Old Cheney Road at east and west of 27th. There will be a message up there reminding people about trains. There's also one at Highway 2 just west of 14th. They will be doing that. In addition to that, they're going to dispatch and set out along the side of the road 9 other variable message signs advising people to watch for the trains. There will be one at 14th Street southbound, 40th Street southbound, 27th Street both north and southbound, 56th Street southbound because there will be a billboard coming north, 70th Street and 84th Street. We're thinking putting one in both directions on those as well. So LTU is contributing those, and those will go up as well. I think they're very useful, and they work pretty well for reminding people that there's things there. So back to the general discussion about the possibility of a quiet zone along corridor. Yes, Jane.
Could I ask a question before you go into the quiet zone? On 84th Street, you said right now they don't have any crossing arms there, but you anticipate they will have the crossing arms in place on 84th Street in January, and all the other upgrades on 84th will come at a later time. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, in fact, I expect the railroad crossing to be widened out and the signals to be up and operational within about 2 weeks.
Okay, yeah.
They're out there working right now, and the city has to come back. They bid a project, but it's late in the year, and temperatures were getting cold, and it's asphalt, and the bids were exorbitantly high. And so they're choosing to wait and rebid that in the spring. And we had concurrence with the railroad to do that. We've made sure that the gates that come down will cross in the middle, even though there isn't a median out there yet, but that will get done yet before the trains run.
Great. I saw them working on Saturday. There.
Okay, so a quiet zone. What is a quiet zone? I kind of like to call them, they're called a quieter zone. Because they're not always quiet. A quiet zone is simply a corridor of railroad tracks with at-grade crossings with public roadways in which you have done improvements and such that the railroad does not have to sound their horn, which is a federal mandate at highway rail grade crossings. Within about an eighth to a quarter of a mile or so, and about 15 seconds before they get there, the locomotive is required to blow their horn, too long, a short, and a long. Engineers that do not do that are relieved of duty and fired almost immediately. It is a serious issue. So that's a requirement. In order for the train and the engineer not to blow their horn at those crossings, there has to be a certain amount of safety equipment installed at the crossing that provide a reasonable ability to be sure that folks aren't going to go around the gates or go across the crossing or try to beat the train. As a minimum, there's got to be gates and lights, either a median to keep people from going around, 4-quadrant gates on all 4 sides so they can't get through there. There has to be constant warning circuitry in the railroad tracks themselves, and what that means simply is that the gates have to know when to start coming down. You know, if you come up to a crossing, a train is coming, first the lights will start flashing and the bells start dinging, and then in a little bit the gate comes down. All of that is triggered off of circuitry back by a train approaching that track. Well, some trains might be going 5 miles an hour and some of them might be going 65 miles an hour, and that technology has to know how fast that train is coming to make sure that the lights start and the gates get down. When the lights and bells start, they need to start early enough so that anybody on those tracks can get cleared out and get out of the way before the gates come down too. That circuitry is significantly expensive and is sometimes a big part of the cost of quiet zones. Quiet zones got to be at least a half a mile long and have a public crossing. You can use those gates and lights. You could also put in what's called a wayside horn that would blow instead of the locomotive horn not blowing. We have one at 35th and Adams. I have regularly told you guys I wouldn't recommend another wayside horn within the city of Lincoln just because of the technical difficulties and weather, and they don't always work, and you still have a horn blowing. It's certainly not nearly as loud as the train whistles. So those are the general requirements. Private crossings in the middle of these things create some issues. Whether or not you can get an agreement with the railroad perhaps not to blow the horn at a private crossing. Doesn't do a lot of good to spend millions of dollars building a quiet zone and then have a crossing somewhere in the middle that the horns blow. I think that we will be challenged as you look at this corridor. Please, go ahead.
I mean, there's almost more private crossings than there are public, if you go all the way out.
If you go all the way out. And, you know, I certainly wouldn't recommend once we get outside the city limits that you're doing a quiet zone for those rural roads that have probably less than 100 cars a day and 2 trains. But
So you're saying even if we did a quiet zone, you know, I'll say 14th to, I'll pick 70th, 80th.
well, you probably have to include pioneers.
Pioneers.
All
There's,
the way,
what,
perhaps.
four private crossings, 5, so that even if we did the quiet zone, they'd still be blowing at those private crossings.
Unless we can get an agreement, those would have to be things that would be part of the discussion. It's certainly, this will be a challenging corridor because of the close proximity of the railroad tracks to Highway 2. When I said you needed medians have to be at least 100 feet long to keep people from going around the gates, and in some of these locations there isn't 100 feet from the railroad tracks out, so then you're required probably to put in 4-quadrant gates. 4-quadrant gates run in the tune of $250,000 to $500,000 per crossing, so not inexpensive. If you'll remember, when we looked at Southwest Lincoln, we had 7 crossings out there. We were right at $5 to $5.5 million for that proposed quiet zone, and that was 4 years ago. Inflation since then, it was decided to put that on hold. So I'm sitting here today telling you that I think anything we do along Highway 2 would be significantly more expensive than that. I don't know how you split it up as you go all the way through. Horns sounding at 14th Street are going to be heard at 27th and just, you know, on down, going and coming. Yeah. I did contact 3 local firms, engineering firms, that do work of this sort and have done work for the RTSD and for the city. I got a range of doing a feasibility study. This would be a feasibility study, not an actual quiet zone study, but just is it feasible and what might you have to do in a cost. And the firm that was going to look at it from 50,000 feet, around $100,000, to doing a little bit more detailed, $150,000 to $200,000. That would just be to see if it's feasible. I'm going to stand here today and recommend to you guys that I think a quiet zone today or making a decision today is premature. These are going to be freight trains. We don't know what time of day they're going to be running. I presume a quiet zone is perhaps more important in a residential area. If the trains are running at night, you're thinking about sleep. But again, we don't know whether they're going to run during the day, during the night, and I would guess we'll get combinations of that. My thought is that, and my recommendation to you would be, why don't we let things run for a while? Let's see when the trains are running. Let's see what kind of issues. We might actually have more congestion issues during the daytime with those trains than we'll have quiet zone issues at night. I don't know. And then, March meeting, we can revisit and rediscuss where we are, how things have gone. I'm sure by that time we will have received a lot of additional input from the public on how that's going. And then we would also have the June meeting. If this board felt that it was incumbent to do something quicker, we can always advertise and call a special board meeting to do something at this point. So I certainly open to, I've gone on and on here, but that's my recommendation to you. I'm feeling good about what the railroad, the city, and the county, and the RTSD has done to this point, and I think we'll be in as good a condition as we perhaps could be. So I'd answer any questions.
Jane?
Surprise. So Roger, when we talk about quiet zones, and primarily I'm looking at the corridor that impacts the city from Pioneers to 84th.
Okay.
Can you establish like a segments of quiet zone from like Pioneers to 40th is one quiet zone, and then
if you do a quiet zone and then you want to do a different one, you have to be separated by at least one public crossing, or if you do one and then you want to do another one, you can extend the one you've got. But if you're going to do individuals, there has to be a public crossing somewhere in between them, and the horns would have to sound there. Wherein I think some of the challenges, and if we actually got into a full-blown study, by putting noise corridors, contours out there, you could kind of determine how far the noise is going to go and where it overlaps from one intersection to the other to make it advisable or not, that if you don't do this one, you're still going to hear the noise. I live at 56 and South Street, and I am so attuned, they don't bother me, but I hear the horns at Havelock Shop. I hear the horns down here. I hear the horns down south, and a lot of that. So the noise, the sound goes a long ways. And I think that would be one of the challenges, is whether or not you could piece and parcel this. I don't know how you would choose to do that. Again, I think that's a horrific expenditure, potential expenditure for an RTSD for 2 trains a day. The Cornhusker Highway Corridor has anywhere from 50 to 70 trains a day. The corridor going southwest to Hastings has, the inventory sheet says 20 trains a day. I'm not sure quite that many run, but so there's certainly more trains there than there are here. But which is why I am suggesting that we defer the decision and let it ride a little bit. But other questions, Jane?
Well, I don't know about my colleagues, but I've received a lot of phone calls and a lot of concerns, surprisingly, from areas that are further east, like Pine Lake Road, Yankee Hill, and going towards areas of growth, tremendous growth in our city. One family that I visited on Saturday, I said, when was your house built? And they're just south of Pine Lake Road, and it would be just a little bit west of 70th Street. And if you look on one of the maps, you can see that there's tremendous growth right there. Those homes weren't there 5 years ago. So for them, that's going to be, when we look at the core and the heart of the city, and I don't mean to diminish anyone's need or request for a quiet zone anywhere else in the city, To say that 33rd and Cornhusker, well, they're used to it because they're the high volume of trains. But this is going to be something that people have no idea what's going to happen to them, let alone the congestion is definitely one issue, but the noise. And I know you could, I just want to put in that plug that I would like to see us authorize a feasibility study so we could stay ahead of the curve on concerns that people might have, so that I have something to communicate to all the constituents as they raise their concerns, not only about the traffic congestion, which we are going to hear from, but also about, we don't know when the trains are running, and your point is a valid one.
Right.
But people will have concerns. It's something that they just have not had an experience with.
And so I certainly have some empathy there. One of the things I would like to say, last weekend I went through and cleaned up and deleted over 5,000 emails that had accumulated over my career as city engineer, getting rid of some of them. But I would tell you, on a regular basis, when folks were building and buying in Southeast Lincoln, we got calls and emails about those tracks. And the constant, consistent answer is there aren't any trains running today, but on any given day tomorrow they could start. And so folks have made some of that conscious decision. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do something, but it's probably one of the fears we had. We just kept saying any day it could happen, and I think a lot of folks said, well, but it probably won't. And we've never said that, but certainly your points are valid.
Okay. Anyone else?
I have
Go
I have another question about the Pine Lake Road crossing. Since that work was recently done just to the west of the roundabout on Pine Lake Road, and I know in some of the locations you said, well, they have the median is already there, and the crossing arms. I don't know if that's the case with the Pine Lake Road crossing, but you also said the medians have to be about 100 feet long. And so on some of the newer development and maybe some of the existing developments, I'm thinking of at 14th Street. Does that have a long enough median? And what would be the modifications to 14th Street? I mean, I guess these are questions I have on creating a quiet zone. Like some areas already have the infrastructure in place, some don't, and those are the ones that are going to be pretty darn pricey. But I guess I won't know until we've done a feasibility study and they give us a price tag on it. And we know from the southwest part of Lincoln, where there is also a lot of growth going on, how expensive that was.
Both Pine Lake Road and Yankee Hill really shouldn't require little or if any expenditure. That's good. But certainly Pioneers and 14th Street, I've got it up on the screen. The median is probably pretty good to the south. That complicated intersection to the north creates some additional expenditures. Southwood would require the putting in the medians, and the thing that you would happen is right north of that.
There's an entrance, yeah.
There are driveways. There can't be, you're shutting off access then to people making left turns. Up in here, we would have some issues. But those would be things exactly that you would be analyzing and studying. I think probably sitting here and thinking about the projects that are on the books, we put the Southwest Quiet Zone on hold. We've put the Hobson relocation on hold. Almost all of our financing right now is being focused to 33rd and Cornhusker. With the levy reduction over the last couple of years, we said we were going to kind of try to maintain the status quo. I don't know how it would be physically possible, financially possible, for the district to fund quiet zones along this corridor in the next few years without the levy being back at its maximum and perhaps deferring some of the other projects. But that would be a further discussion that needs to happen. I had another thought and it just went away. we're already in a situation as the environmental document, and I don't want to get into too much stuff because Chris is going to come up here and we need to move along.
Right.
We're going to be needing to thinking about budgets and cash flows and all of those things, and we'll start revisiting all of that at the March meeting, and then again the budget meeting in June. But at any rate, so any other questions?
So maybe between now and then, could you kind of hone in on exactly what the feasibility study would encompass?
Yes, I can try. I'm going to try to defend my consultants. It takes a significant amount of time and effort on their part to put together proposals and to scope and estimate things out. Right. And then if you don't move ahead, you've just wasted their time and their money. And I try to be very respectful of that. But I'll try to do a better job of meeting with them and trying to figure out what would be the minimum amount of work that would have to be done to, you know, if the feasibility study came back to you and it said it's going to cost $10 million to do a quiet zone along there, is that enough money for you to say, whoa, we're not going to do that?
Wait, so they wouldn't, you're saying on a feasibility study, or they're saying we estimate that it's going to be $10 million for this whole chunk in the city?
Yes. The feasibility study would tell us what a quiet zone might cost to do.
And the more detail we want in that, the higher the cost of the feasibility study is going to be.
And I think some of the complicating factors for this one is Lincoln does a lot of public involvement. And to do a quiet zone is going to affect access points to people's homes and businesses along this corridor. And so we may decide, well, you could do this and put a median out there. You go down to South 40th and go a half a block south and cut those two residential streets off. But that was a huge fight when we built the roadway. So I think there would be a fair amount of public involvement that would need to be done as part of the feasibility study to know it's physically feasible, but is it personally feasible within the environment and the community we live in?
So the question before us today, I think what I'm hearing is you're proposing that we wait until March, the trains start. We're going to see some train movement as a preliminary, but the actual coal trains back and forth to Nebraska City start January 1st. We are meeting again in March, and Roger's proposal is that we wait until our March meeting to decide if it warrants a feasibility study, and then determining kind of the limits of that study. I'm hearing Jane say she'd like to go forward with the feasibility study now, before the trains start, just so we would have the idea on the costs involved, which we know will be significant, but that's correct.
I think so, and even more specific, it would be the low-hanging fruit. Which intersections do we know from a higher, assessment would be easy to convert? If they could, most engineers can probably do a walkthrough and say, 14th and Old Cheney, we can do the south side, Pine Lake Road, almost done, 84th, we got that covered, so that they could give us better directions on that. I mean, if...
There's going to be a variety. We've got a variety of crossings out here. They're going to need different, and I think we all understand that some of them are close to ready, some are not. The question before us today, though, and we've got lots of questions as we go into this new project. The big question today is, does the board want to wait till March to make this decision, or do we want to move forward today with the feasibility study? We have Roger recommending that we wait. And we have Jane recommending that we go forward with the feasibility study today.
Well, getting concrete bids to do a feasibility study so that at our March meeting, I know you already gave us an estimate from about $100,000 to anywhere from
to 200.
But
a reminder, professional services aren't bid. They have to be qualification based. So we'd have to write a proposal of what we want from them. have the proposals submitted, I'd have to review them, select somebody, then you have to sit down and negotiate the fee. So you're never exactly sure what that fee is going to be with professional services. It's not like a construction contract or something else.
But Roger, do we have the team and staff that could do some of that legwork in anticipation that maybe we could review where you're at in March so that we could trigger it? I just don't want to be so far behind when we have constituents calling us, particularly, Deb's going to get bombarded a lot in her district. I'm going to get bombarded a lot in my district, and I'm sure they're going to pick on Roy.
I'm going to move on to
Yeah.
Commissioner Edmondson. I think you had a question.
I did, and I just really, and I'll make a motion later on. When did quiet zones really enter into our conversation? How many years ago?
15 or 20.
Okay, and so many of the houses that have been built and so forth, and I know that is always a concern, but our city was constructed, the railroad went through there, and I don't know how we can, jerry-rig, if you want to call some of those quiet zones. Because,
Yeah. The
Yeah.
other thing I wanted to say, just so everybody knows, is the railroads don't pay for quiet zones, the DOTs don't pay for quiet zones, and you really don't get grants. So the road authority is responsible. In Lincoln, Hickman, Waverly, the RTSD has been the funder. When you're done, the local road authority has to accept the infrastructure that's been built and agree to continue to maintain that. There is added cost to that as too. So any cost done would have to be either by the city or by the RTSD.
Okay. And you had a...
Yes, and I am simply going to make a motion that we go forward with your recommendation that we wait.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a second. Deb?
I will support the motion because I think we're going to gain a lot of data in those first 2 months. We're all going to have to be tracking where the calls are coming from. It's going to be a difference in the time of year. Trees are down, so we know sound's going to travel more. But I would be interested in, tracking where we're getting the majority of the complaints, and then, having that information. And, you talked about low-hanging fruit. I see more of a long-term plan. This year we're focusing on this one, and this year we're focusing on that one. And the thing that hangs out there for me is, right now it's 2 trains, but we know there could be more. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need to be prepared in that way. But I'm going to support the motion just because I think we need a little bit more data that we can gain in the next 2 months.
Okay.
Well, I have a question. So I would like more data, certainly, if the train car is going to be 1.5 miles long. So could we get someone to do a scenario like 1.5 miles? We're talking about it's going to be blocking up, and maybe LTU has already done this, and that would be,
Yes.
and I would like to see
Be
the
glad
study.
to send you the report.
That would be great.
Okay, yeah, I'd
think-
like to see it too.
I think that would be helpful so that we could see that 1.5 mile. That means it's going to shut down Pioneers, 14th, and Southwood. I'm guessing that's 1.5
Not sure I've
miles.
had it drawn that way. Right now, the study would tell you how long each of those crossings, when the train is there, how far the cars will back up and in what areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, because we have, let's be clear, and so that we keep future conversations clean, we have 2 issues here, and one's the sound of the train horns going off through these numerous crossings, and the other is the length of time that these crossings will be blocked by trains. 2 different issues. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion before we vote?
I just want to say for the record that I do support getting as much data done sooner and starting to collect the process and reaching out on the feasibility studies to be better prepared and qualified come in March to make a good decision. And I know the data is essential. So respectfully, I'm going to say no. I think we should get it in the works now. So.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I think that we do want to be prepared when we come back here in March, depending on what we learn. All right, no further discussion. Please call the roll.
No.
Yes.
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 Okay. Motion carries 4-1. We will move on to item 8, tort claim update.
Good morning. Bill Cudel at Crosby Gunzel Law Firm here today. And Roger asked me to provide a brief update to the tort claim and what I can speak to publicly regarding it since the last meeting. And as I reported in September, the RTSD did receive a tort claim in that a few weeks prior to that in August. That purported claim stems from an alleged accident that occurred at Northwest 12th Street and Kingberg Road by a bicyclist who was riding late wee hours of August 21st, 2019, and hit the tracks apparently or allegedly and was injured as a result of a fall. Since our last meeting, I can confirm that I've hadn't had any substantive or material contact with the claimant's attorney, but the claim hasn't been withdrawn or otherwise disposed of outside of proceedings. There was a similar claim lodged against the city of Lincoln, and that claim ultimately has gone to litigation. And a few weeks ago, the city did file its answer to the claim, denying responsibility and liability. So that's where it sits publicly. I'll continue to obviously monitor this and update the board as appropriate. Are there any questions I can speak to publicly regarding this? Okay.
I don't see any, Bill. Thank you for keeping us posted.
Will do.
Item 9, report of project and crossing updates.
Chris Humphrey's got an update for us on our 33rd and Cornhusker. So PowerPoint's up if they don't
Okay.
turn it on.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what we've been working on since last time we met. As you recall, you took action and approved an agreement, a third-party agreement with BNSF at the last meeting. That was for BNSF to hire a consulting firm to review the plan. So we just met with them last week. So they will be, BNSF's consultant will be moving forward with review of the 30% plans. They will also review at the 60, 90, and then the final submittals as they come due throughout the life of the project. But we're working forward on that. And we have also been coordinating with the planning department on the sub-area plan. You might have seen that we've had the Planning Commission briefing and then the Planning Commission public hearing last Wednesday, and they moved to move forward with that. They approved that sub-area plan. It will be introduced to council and then public hearing at council at the next council meetings. That will be either later this year, early next year. The council will see that and take action on it. And the big thing that we have been working on is the 44th Street crossing. So I will bring up a picture on the screen. Hopefully it'll come up. And so, as you recall, last time we had talked about the 44th Street crossing, and I think, I was hoping you can see my mouse move on here. But basically what you see on the screen, on the left is the 33rd and Cornhusker area. That's the viaduct that will go over the railroad. On the right side of your screen is the area that we had the Fremont Street connector from 44th to 48th Street, the 44th Street crossing. In simplistic terms, we talked before about going over, under, and around, specifically at that 44th Street crossing, closing the crossing to vehicles and leaving it open in some sort of fashion for the pedestrians. After we took a look at all the technical engineering challenges to that area, we've also talked with community leaders. We've spoken with the advisory group committee, and based on all of that information, the social information, the technical information, the decision is made to leave that crossing open to both pedestrians and vehicles. So that crossing will continue to function as it is today. We will not be constructing a roadway between 44th and 48th Street, what I used to call the Fremont Street connector. So that will all remain as it is today. There was a lot of concern socially of dividing the neighborhood south of Cornhusker and the neighborhood north of Cornhusker. And that coupled with just the cost of the project, the value that it would add to those users, the concerns and the challenges of each of those different options, the decision was made to at least not do anything at this time. We've talked with the advisory group, with the Planning Commission, and let them know that as part of the RTSD's mission is to improve safety at each railroad crossing. Since we're not doing anything at this time does not mean that we won't be looking at anything in the future, potentially with another city project, but at least for this time in this particular project, it will remain functioning as it is today.
Did you get any pushback against leaving it open, Chris? Was there anyone opposed that brought objections?
I think there were some concerns about from the trail system, and we are planning on meeting with the Pedestrian Bike Advisory Committee, hopefully in January, just to let them know of our decision to that, since there's an existing sidewalk at that crossing today that will still remain and function as it is. It's just kind of improving the safety there of having a grade separation structure. That's really the only thing that we've heard. Okay. And there's about, probably 1,500 vehicles a day that use it, and based on our counts, maybe about 20 or 30 pedestrians or bicyclists, the combination of the two that use that crossing each day as well. That particular crossing, we don't have any history of injuries or fatalities. Those have occurred more in the 33rd and Adams Street area. So that kind of weighed into our decision as well.
That allows us to continue on with the main project, the main priority, and avoid the costs and complications that went with it. So I'm glad to hear that it was received.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Roy has a question,
So
if you don't mind.
we just had a very lengthy discussion about the Highway 2 corridor and 2 trains a day and the quiet zone study, feasibility study. How many trains a day are we seeing go through 33rd and Cornhusker?
I think the data sheets show about 70 some trains a day. Of course, that just kind of depends on the season and everything else, but going back to that exposure rating where we multiply the vehicles times the trains, at least in the 33rd and Adams area, it's pretty significant, with this being 1,500 trains or 1,500 vehicles a day, and I think 70 some. I'd have to go back and check what the data sheets show, but it was significantly more than 2. So.
Okay.
And then the other thing that we're still working on is the Dead Man's Run coordination. And I know we've talked about this a lot, but I think it's been quite a while I've showed you anything on the screen at least. So this is zoomed out a little bit farther. The blue line that you see kind of squiggling diagonally through there is the Dead Man's Run study area. And that goes from Cornhusker Highway to just upstream of 48th Street. That's a federal project that's being led by the Corps of Engineers. And we are just finalizing the hydraulics on that and ready to move forward on plan set development after the beginning of the year here. As you can see on the screen, it's in close proximity to the 33rd and Cornhusker project. And because of the hydraulics that we're studying and some more detailed engineering that we've been doing on the 33rd and Cornhusker project in terms of overland flow in that neighborhood north of Huntington, we are making sure that the structure that we have in place for 33rd Street is going to be the appropriate structure. Before we talked about that would be like a very large size box culvert. We're talking maybe a triple cell 20 by 20. Turns out it's going to have to be a little bit larger for that. And when we get into structures of that size, then we start looking at, well, does the bridge make more sense? So right now we are waiting on Dead Man's Run to finish up the hydraulics so that we can take a look to see if a bridge does make more sense hydraulically, and in terms of our project to help handle the overland flow. We obviously don't want 33rd Street, since it'll be raised up, to act as a dam for that overland flow coming off of that neighborhood. So just trying to make the most of every taxpayer dollar that we have. So that decision will likely come in January. That does push back some of the submittals. So the public hearing that we were planning for the environmental document will probably take place in fall instead of the summer. But with that, I think there's some efficiencies that we can have with the project and still keep it on schedule for 2026 construction. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Very good. Thank you for that update, Chris.
Thank you.
Appreciate the progress.
We've run along. The only other crossing update I would say is 18th and Y. OL&B completed that last week. The sidewalks still need to be done. I drove over it this morning. It looks pretty good. So one more bad crossing taken care of.
Okay. We will move on to item 10 then, the upcoming schedule for 2021 RTSD meetings. As we've mentioned, we do have a meeting March 2nd, and then every quarter, June 7th, September 7th, and December 6th.
These fit the typical schedule that the RTSD has done over the last several years of alternating between Tuesdays and Mondays, between County Commissioner days, City Council days, with March being a Tuesday, June Monday, September Tuesday, and December. We would schedule those. That doesn't mean under certain circumstances, if we needed to, a meeting could be changed to a different date. We have tried to avoid doing that. And I know we're running long. I apologize for that. But because of the unusual circumstances that we're all living in these days, and James was not with us today, and so we had some discussion. So I've asked Bill Kudelek if he would take just a couple of minutes to help educate us a little bit about virtual meetings. Can we, can't we? What's the authority to do that? Because we're never quite sure what's going to happen in these upcoming days. So.
Again, Bill Kudelek, Crosby Guns Law Firm. Roger, over the last few weeks, actually over this year, Roger and I have been talking about contingency planning and what we can do as a board with respect to that. And it's come up again, and it came up again this morning. The Open Meetings Act does allow, as a matter of course, some political subdivisions to meet remotely. There are very specific types of political subdivisions fit within that category, that stated category, and the RTSD is not one of those. So we do have to be prepared to meet in person, physically here. There is, Governor Ricketts did issue Executive Order 20-34, which was effective on, I think, October 30th of this year, runs through the end of the year. It does allow elected officials to participate remotely if they are within the scope of the executive order, and that is if they are required to quarantine due to exposure to COVID. It doesn't go beyond that, according to the terms and the provisions I reviewed this morning. So if there was an occasion where one of you were required to quarantine and wasn't able to be physically present, you could remote in and be counted for quorum purposes. Okay. So that's kind of where we sit right now. I would expect that we're going to be dealing with these issues into next year. The governor's executive order expires on the 31st, as I said, but
I thought it was extended till January.
What is it? I haven't looked at it recently.
It's January 31st now.
Okay.
Why would we be able to abide by one executive order and not both? Mm-hmm. You're saying that if one executive order from the governor said if someone should have to be quarantined, an elected official, that would be fine to be able to Zoom in. But why would it not be the same application of the same executive order for all of us to Zoom in? With or without a quarantine matter in place?
The executive order I was referring to is 2034. Mm-hmm. Okay, so and that one was specific to elected official who couldn't be present due to quarantine and had to deal with that. So, but if there were multiple executive orders, I think that they were applicable to this entity. I think that they would certainly apply.
I'm not sure I understand your answer. If we can abide by the quarantine, and say I have to be quarantined, I could still participate in the meeting and my vote would count. Right. But I thought you said that as an RTSD board that we cannot have a Zoom meeting.
As
and
a matter of course.
And conduct business.
Right, as a matter of course, this entity doesn't fit within the Open Meetings Act 84-1411 subsection 2 that allows certain types of political subdivisions to meet remotely as a matter of course, regardless
Some
of.
can, but we are not in that group. That
Oh,
would-
We are not in that group.
That's a state statute.
Okay, but I still don't understand why we can participate on the quarantine side and not on,
Because in my view, the governor's executive order expands the ability to allow some flexibility for those who are subject to quarantine to to be counted to meet in person, even though they weren't allowed to under the existing statutes.
So it allows us, it protects the work of the board if suddenly we have a lot of members who are
Correct.
subject to quarantine. It allows us to continue to do our work.
That's right.
Sounds like there's two distinctions in these executive orders, is the way you're reading it.
One for quarantine.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Does that help, Jane, or?
not really, because they're both executive orders from the governor dictating and
Well-
determining how we conduct our business.
Well,
And so,
one- let me-
if
let
you can
me-
accept one, why can't you accept the other one? Because you're saying, you're allowing it to have jurisdictional authority on us as a board where you're saying we can't qualify for the Zoom on another level. I
Well-
find that that's,
What I heard, and Bill will correct me, what I heard was that the one with Zoom, just in general, as general practice, we're not in a category that fits that.
Correct.
On the other one, it's broader so that we are included and fit under that
For those entities that do have to meet physically, the governor's executive order does expand the ability for those members, if they're within the scope, and that's quarantine, to participate by remote.
I think I get the distinction you're making, and perhaps we would talk about this further, but I follow what you're
Okay.
saying, and we can clarify more
Sure.
if we need to. So, anything else on that, Roger?
No, I just wanted that discussion in case something came up and we needed to.
Okay.
remove
Well,
it.
and we'll see, I mean, unless we have to have an emergency session, maybe March, the world will be a better place. I keep thinking it's coming. All right, then, item 11, we have non-agenda items, public comment. Is there anyone here with an item that wasn't on the agenda today or to make a public comment?
My name is Richard Schmelling. I'm at 2601 South 58th Street, Apartment 17, Lincoln, Nebraska. And this, first of all, I'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas. We're heading into a Christmas season that's going to be different than that we're used to, and I certainly hope that we can find some way to have a little bit of cheer and joy with the Christmas season. This is kind of peripheral in the sense that you have kind of discussed it, but I think there's some important facts that you need to be aware of. Number one, in addition to the other things that the railroad has done, the railroad has put in a new number 18 turnout. Now, turnout's a fancy name for a switch or two tracks diverge. The railroad has put in a number 18 turnout where the coal trains will come off the Kansas City main line and go on to the line to Nebraska City. Generally speaking, the higher number the turnout, the faster the train can go through it. There was a lower numbered turnout there. So you see what's going to happen is the speed that the trains will traverse the Highway 2 corridor will be higher as a result of that work that's been done. Also, you know, with all this tie work and the rail fine-tuning, they're trying to get the speed limit up so that they speed up the transit time. There is an issue which I have raised with Roger, which I've never gotten a satisfactory answer to, and that is the yard limit The old yard limit was there at 56th Street. Now, I hesitate to say that I know more about railroad operations than Roger, but I think I do.
You hesitate, but not completely hesitate. Okay.
I worked for 10 years as a crew van driver, and I worked with the railroaders, and I pretty much know the book of rules and what they have to do. When trains are operating within a yard limit, they have to operate at such a speed that they can stop before they crash. We had a crash on that Nebraska City line a number of years ago. We had a sand run going out to the ready mix plant, and an empty coal train was coming into town, and they were at a curve where they didn't see each other, and we totaled out the switch engine and messed up a bunch of road engines. We no longer have that sand run going out to that ready mix plant. They're getting their stuff by truck. It would seem to me that the railroad could move the yard limit further west, almost to 14th Street. That would allow them to increase their speed. And I think there needs to be some conversation between Roger and the railroad about that. Also, there's some question marks in my mind because we have a grain elevator at Syracuse. And this is in the letter to you that you should have a copy of. We have that grain elevator, and that's shipping unit trains. Well, they've been shipping them eastward on the Union Pacific because that was your designated operator for that stretch. The question becomes, now, will those trains go west through Lincoln? And that could mean that instead of 1 or 2 trains a day, you might have 3 or 4. The third issue, which has not been addressed, is that there's a customer in Syracuse that gets tank cars of anhydrous ammonia. I assume it's anhydrous. And that's a sporadic thing. You know, it's during growing season. But that was being handled by Union Pacific with a local train, which would be a couple engines and maybe 2 or 3 cars.
1 minute, sir.
Thank you. And the question is, will BNSF be operating locals from the west end? I want to reiterate something that I think is very important. You are a railroad transportation safety district. You are not a railroad transportation noise abatement district. I think it would be a gross misallocation of tax revenue to spend money on a quiet zone in the south part of Lincoln. And I just take you back to basics. That's not your duty to make things quiet and pleasant for people. It's to operate trains safely through the area. So I hope you all keep that in mind when you make that decision. Thank you for your time, and as I say, have a Merry Christmas.
Richard, I have a question for you, if I may.
Well, that's a good question. We're not allowed at our meetings, but I'm going to go ahead, Jane, if you have a question.
Well, Richard, you mentioned the speed of if you work and have them in the yard. Right now, they're anticipated to go about 25 to 30 miles per hour. How much faster do you think those trains would be permitted to go, based on what you were talking about earlier?
Okay. Generally speaking, on the main line, loaded coal trains usually can go up to 50 miles an hour. And again, that depends upon the condition of the track and so on. But I know when we get loaded coal trains that come into the yard here in Lincoln from Alliance, those trains are going 50. So it could be that instead of going 10 or 15 or 25 miles an hour, if you move that yard limit sign in and you got the track good and the bridge is good, you could have those trains clipping along about 50 miles an hour and clearing those crossings a lot faster.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Richard, and Merry Christmas to you as well.
Very festive.
Appreciate the lights. Anyone else here to comment on non-agenda items? Seeing no one.
I move adjournment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for adjournment. Please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned. Thank you.